Welcome to the RUBSC podcast, Finding Your Triathlon Why, sponsored by BSC Multisport. My name is Todd. I'm here with my co-host Jordan.
Hello, everyone.
And Coach Scott.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, thanks for joining our next podcast. We're here today to talk about an important subject and something that I think a lot of people might find they're doing wrong, or at least approaching it in the wrong way, and that is the long run, and making sure that you're applying the right approach to your long run, how you're going to pace it, and how you're applying it within the volume of your run program. So, Coach, maybe you can set the stage for us, talk to us a little bit about the setup for the long run and how we should be thinking about the long run in our training program.
Okay. When I think about the long run for our purposes, I'm talking about it for a triathlon. Excuse me. So people that are from a running background first, they might take exception to a couple of the things I'm about to say. But I look at it this way. We're training for multi-sport, and you can't train, you can't race if you're sick or injured. And if you're going to get an injury, as often as not, it's the long run that's going to cause the injury. So I think we need to take a lot of due diligence on the long run and make sure that it's not creating problems, it's not creating setbacks, and that we can treat it in the right way so that we can move forward instead of have problems. So one thing that a lot of people do, and this is true just so many people, is they're going too fast, they're going too hard on their long run. Ideally, the pace of the long run it's a conversational pace. You should be able to say, Mary had a little lamb, or Pledge of Allegiance, or whatever phrase you want to be able to say. You should be able to say that completely without gasping. And if you start gasping, you're going too fast. And it should be, if you're using heart rate, it should be low Z2, high Z1. And I challenge you to go that slow, because most people aren't. When Jordan and I started working together a couple years ago, the very first conversation Jordan and I had, he said, "Hey, Coach, I've been running, I've been working, and I'm just not getting any better on the run, and I don't understand why." And I started digging into his training logs, and all of his runs were squarely in zone 3. He was going too hard to force adaptations for the aerobic energy pathways, and he wasn't going hard enough to force adaptations for the anaerobic energy pathways. So what he was doing is he was running, he was sweating, he was doing a lot of work, but he wasn't getting any benefit for that. And so the first thing we did with Jordan is slowed him down a lot. And he was very resistant to that at first, until he started seeing results. And I'll let him speak to that in just a second. He's down there smiling, and I'm sure he remembers this. We had a lot of somewhat heated conversations over this, certainly at the beginning. So Jordan, if you want to comment on that.
It was one of those experiences where every time I'd run, every run was hard. I was always gassed afterwards. Even the short runs, the long runs, the medium runs, everyone I was just kind of tired. When I started to slow it down, it wasn't fun, because I realized I was running 2 minutes slower than I was used to, and it didn't seem fun. I kind of enjoyed feeling like I get a workout in, but it also affected all of my other workouts too. So if I do a long run on the weekend, zone 3 effort, I was not going to put in any type of quality work. Swimming, biking, running, it was just going to be just a lot of inefficient work, and I would be really tired and not have as much fun at home after I'd be done with the long run. When I started to slow it down, I'd come home and, we would just get the family in the car and go right to the pool and just play and have a good time, because I felt like I could do that. If I were to do my long run when I was running hard, I would come home and sit on the couch and eat a bag of Cheetos, which would ruin all of the run work that I had just put in.
Jordan, what happened to your pace? That's one of the things I'm interested in, is your pace when we started together versus where you're at now.
So my pace at first really didn't do much. I just was running slower. And then over time, after a few weeks, a few months, I started to realize I could run just a little bit faster. And now I can go out and run a zone 1 or zone 2 probably about the same pace I was running my other runs at, but I'm in zone 1 and, you know, a heart rate that is super low, but I'm now at that same pace that I thought was a good running pace. And now if I were to go out and, you know, run some, you know, intervals, it's a minute or 2 minutes faster than I ever could have thought about running a 1600 or an 800, you know, just a couple years ago.
So that really goes to my whole thing about people run too fast. And I talk about the courage to run slow, because it's counterintuitive. How am I going to get faster by running slower? And you just have to trust that you're training the energy pathways in your body to become more efficient. And running slow does that most effectively. And that will allow your body to process fat for fuel more efficiently and create more energy. As you create more energy, you have more energy to utilize while you're running at the same heart rate. And it just snowballs, and you become faster. And so the other concern that I have with the long run is people run too far for the long run relative to their overall volume. So what I mean by that, there's some schools of thought that your long run shouldn't be more than 25 to 35% of your total volume. So if you're only running 30 miles a week, which a lot of triathletes, that's a pretty good week for them. If you're only running 30 miles, 35% is what, 10 and a half miles? And yet there's people going out and they're running 18 and 20 mile long runs. Their next longest run is 5 miles. And that's a huge difference. It's a huge jump from 5 miles to 20 miles. And it's just asking for injury. And when you're doing 20-mile long runs relative to a 30-mile volume, again, the same thing, you're just asking for an injury. Then when you're doing it too fast on top of that, that makes it even worse. So I'm going to mention something just quickly. We're not going to go into it in depth here. And you can certainly, you can look it up on the internet, Google, or you can go to the Slow Twitch website. You can look it up there. There's all kinds of information there. I'm a big believer in the Barry P running plan. And the Barry P running plan has you running 6 times a week. And it's just factors of your short run. So if your short run is a mile, your medium run is 2 times that, or 2 miles. Your long run is 3 times that, or 3 miles. And so you do 3 short runs, 2 medium runs, and 1 long run per week. So if you're running a 1 mile base, or the short run is a mile, for the week it's 10 miles. And so if you up that to 3 miles short run, you're now up to 30 miles. And it keeps your long run in proportion to your overall volume. I'm a huge believer in Barry P. I've seen it time and time again where it's worked, and it's worked effectively. The downside to it is you're running 6 days a week, and some people can't do that. Although running, let's face it, it's easy. You take a pair of shoes with you, you can run out the door at lunch, it's easy to run. Mm-hmm. So those are the 2 issues I have with the long run for triathletes. And most importantly, I just want people to remember, if you're sick or injured, you can't train or race. And so the respect should be given to the long run, so you don't become injured on a long run that could have easily been avoided.
So thanks, guys. I think this sets the stage then for a little bit of discussion around then application of the long run as it plays out in my training program and as I'm building to my race. So if we start with the triathletes on the team that are more geared towards the sprint and Olympic distance, and looking at some of these programs like Barry P or others that allow me to say, okay, how am I going to map out and how long should I be running on my long run? Those formulas in the Barry P program can help me kind of figure that out, right? If I'm only a short course athlete. But if I'm a long course athlete, maybe we can bridge into that of how it would play out with, I don't just immediately go out and run 20 miles in preparation for the marathon. I need to build up to the point where I'm running a longer distance to prevent injury.
Yes. I don't like to see any more than about a 10% increase per week. And if you've got a history of injury, then it's 10% every other week. So you up the mileage, you'd stay at that mileage for 2 weeks, and then you take a 10% increase and stay at that for 2 weeks. If you're somewhat resistant to injury, an example, Jordan is, to my knowledge, has never had a real injury, certainly that's impacted training. And so we can take a 10% increase, and in time, there's been times we've done even a little bit more than that, maybe a 12 or 14%, and then we'll back off the next week. But typically 10% is a safe increase week over week. as far as how far do you need to run for your individual race, that's more of an athlete by athlete basis. I don't like to give just a sweeping generality type of an answer, because as soon as I say that, somebody's going to go out and it's not going to be enough, or it'll be too much. And I can give a couple of examples. You probably don't need to be running quite as far as you think you do, unless you're planning to stand on the top of the podium at Kona, or the top of the podium at U.S. Nationals or World Nationals or World Championships, something like that. We have an athlete, she was 72 years old when this happened. She broke her hip a month before U.S. Nationals in 2018. She came back from that injury and almost immediately had a pelvic stress fracture. The two of those meant she wasn't doing any running leading up to World Championships last year. Her longest run leading up to World Championships last year was not much more than 3.5 miles. And obviously World Championships is a 10K, so 6.2 miles. She was terrified. And she said, what the heck am I going to do when I get there? We developed a run-walk strategy, and that's what she used at World Championships. She actually had the fastest 10K competition 10K she's ever run. And that was off of 3-mile long runs in training and a run-walk strategy at the race. So smart training will get you to the end. And like I said, the long run probably doesn't need to be as long as you think you do. I had another athlete, this is going back a ways, this is back in 2015 or 16, and Dan, he developed shin splints really, really bad, and he simply could not run further than 6 miles, or he wouldn't be able to walk the next day. If he ran 5.9 miles, he was fine. If he went 6 miles, he couldn't walk, and he couldn't walk for a couple of weeks. So we limited his long run to about 5.5 miles. He was preparing for Ironman Louisville. And so his total run volume was maybe 20 miles a week leading up to Ironman Louisville. He ran a sub 345 marathon at Ironman Louisville, which a lot of people say, well, that's not that fast. But for an age group triathlete, if you look at the numbers, that's not too bad. And considering the run volume that he had leading up to it, it was pretty good overall. So you need to balance your training, obviously swim, bike, and run. The run needs to be an integral part of that. And I like to see balance overall volume ratios of about 25% swim, 50% bike, 25% run. And if you're staying within that ratio, your run volume will typically be about where you need it to be for your particular race. So, and that's as close as I want to get to saying this is how far you should run, because it's going to be different for everybody.
So thinking about, no, that's great, because I think that helps kind of set the foundation for newer athletes to not just jump into something too long or too far too quickly, but thinking about pace and thinking about a little bit, we talked in one of the previous podcasts about RPE. So I go into my long run feeling really good. My heart rate is low, but I'm feeling good, so I might push it a little bit. But that could cause injury, or it could prevent me from actually hitting the targets for the intensity factor that I want to hit for that full workout, right? To not blow up my week. Jordan, what were some of the tips that you kind of did? Did you ever have an opportunity where you were getting into one of your long runs, feeling good that week, pushing it, and then realizing you should have held back? And what are some of the things that you did to kind of reset if you were starting to get into that kind of mentality?
A lot of the longer runs that I've done that have not turned out well, a lot of it has to do with heat and humidity. A couple times I've actually gotten into it, gotten out there, was running great, staying in zone 1, and then all of a sudden I realized I'm in zone 4. Like, it was just all of a sudden it clicked in. So what I did to try to finish that long run is I walked a good amount. At first I started, walking, but I would set a set time frame. So at first I started, with 1-minute walk breaks. Eventually, as I got closer to home, it was 2-minute walk breaks, and then run until I got, back into once I got my heart rate back out of zone, I would try to walk it back down. And that that seemed to salvage, and that got me home. So, and at times I've had to use that in races. Um, so the run walk strategy can really help you control your heart rate, and make it possible to finish out the work that you're supposed to do. Just because you didn't go as many miles as you planned that day, if you still hit your time and you hit your time running, you're going to do that's where you're really going to see the improvements.
Yeah, I know I found in some of my long runs where it translated when I was using the walk run strategy in training, actually translated nicely into my Ironmans where I was walking the aid stations. So I knew I had a little bit of aid station time. My heart rate would come down a couple beats. Starting back up, it would actually help me control that and keep at a more agreeable heart rate for the longer run.
Something I'd like to say to walking, a lot of people look at walking and they're just dead set against it. It's like, oh no, I'm an Ironman, I can't walk. And I challenge you to think differently about that. Sebastian Kinley won the 2014 Ironman championships, and he went into the race planning to walk every single aid station, and indeed he did. From aid station 1, they showed him on TV walking through the aid station, and ultimately he won the race. So walking is not a bad thing in and of itself, especially if it's part of your strategy. And to the long run, to what Jordan had said, if you're using heart rate as your pacing metric, on your long run, you should be low Z2. And if you get out of that, just like Jordan said, walk, slow down, get your heart rate back where it needs. That's the overriding compelling metric, is to get your heart rate into the zone. And if it's too high, walk to bring it back. And again, people say, oh, no, coach, I can't walk. Are you crazy? I'm training to go fast. And I just say, look at the big picture. The big picture is, yes, you're training. You're trying to get your body to adapt a desired way. And if you just push and push and push, it's not going to happen. And Jordan's the proof of that, because he went a long time battling that. And he worked his tail off. There's no question. You look at his logs, he was working his backside off, but nothing was happening. And so don't be Jordan.
So some of that speaks then to when you're planning for your long run and maybe a long ride on the weekends, that those longer events, right, with your shorter sprint and interval and tempo events during the week, all add up to the overall training load, right?
Correct.
And if the long run blows up the intended target for that training load for the week, heading into that next 2 or 3 workouts, you could be sabotaging your ability to hit maybe a target heart rate or target power for those follow-up sessions soon after your long run. So there is, and we spoke about this in one of the last podcasts as well, about remaining consistent in your training and sticking to the goal, because the adaptation that you're forcing needs to happen over time, and you're going to actually hurt yourself in the long run with short-term kind of ego or bold moves in a long run scenario.
Right. When I make a schedule for BSC athletes, the long run is built into it, and there may be, VO2 max or a threshold ride the day after a long run. And people say, oh my gosh, why would you do that after a long run? Well, our long runs aren't so long that they're going to hammer you for days afterwards. Unless you go out and decide to get out of zone and really push it, then you won't be able to do those intense workouts the next day. And so now, like to your point, you've just not only lost the long run day, now you've lost the next day and maybe the day after that. And that goes to consistency. You just gave up 2, 3, 4 days of the week. And so that just blew up your whole week.
And I think that's what leads to injury. I think that
Correct.
you have to keep that in mind, that maybe one push here or there, you may think, oh, no big deal. But if it's combined with the workouts that are before and after, and that repetitive use of your legs on the bike and the run, you're just prone to injury. Then you're just going to open up the door for that.
You have to remember recovery in all this, and a good plan is going to have recovery built in there. But if you go and just go way crazy hard on the long run, then the recovery that you have planned may not be sufficient for what you did. So it all works together, but it starts with keeping your long run at the pace that it should be at.
So I wanted to offer one other thing too that I use in my long run training, and maybe we can ask Jordan as well to offer some of his tips. But when I'm planning my long runs, and I'm usually leaving my house or going to park somewhere, a local park, and I want to think about the hydration for the long run as well as some nutrition, because I think that's another thing that athletes can forget. You get an hour and a half into a run and all you had was a couple sips of water. So I think it's important in the long run to also think about, especially if you're training for long course triathlon, half and full Ironman distances, is to have a couple gel packets, have some water, whether it's a belt water system or a hand bottle that you can carry, to make sure that you have some hydration, especially when you get up over that hour and a half time frame. You shouldn't be just relying on what you drank before and then, oh, I'll catch up later at the end of the run.
Correct.
Yeah, totally agree. Sometimes I'm still struggling to find the exact vest or belt that I like to run with. I have a handheld bottle that I really like. So it's planning it and, maybe having a quick stop at home to refill. I run with, I use our Infinite, which is one of our team sponsors, but I like the custom mix because it's the gels, the hydration, the salt, all in one. I don't have to worry about anything else. So for my long run, or even for some of my medium runs, I'll still bring it, and sometimes I'll plan to stop and grab and refill that bottle throughout. Or sometimes I just know where before COVID, I can stop at some water fountains, and if I got the nutrition and electrolytes at the beginning, I was fine. But sorry. Um, but after I got a chance to okay. Oh, sorry. After I got home, I was okay to finish it off with some water.
Yeah, I do the same thing. So I have a hand bottle that is, I think, a Nathan's bottle setup that has a little pouch too, where I carry a gel or a couple of blocks in there, so that I have some calories as well as Infinite in the bottle or ice water, depending on how long the run is. And then also have a point where I can circle back to the house to fill up and have an extra bottle sitting in the mailbox or something like that I can quickly refill and head out on the second half of the run. I just think it was important for us to cover that as well, because thinking about the long run training and pacing it appropriately, you should be sticking to your pace, and that heart rate is important, because I know a lot of my long runs, I'd be like, I'm feeling good, I'm going to go out, and soon enough I'm at tempo pace, which then no wonder why the next day on the bike at my longer I was hurting, and it's no wonder why. So it's putting me back in my place of saying the long run needs to be at the right pace, the right heart rate to force the adaptation correctly, and be part of the build for that week's and the future weeks' adaptations.
Yes.
Any closing remarks, Coach, on the long run? Anything that our athletes should consider or jot down to make sure that they're approaching this the right way?
Nothing jumping off the top of my head. I don't like to see the long run more than 30% of total volume. So if you're only running 20 miles a week, then your long run shouldn't be more than 6 miles. So, I mean, put that in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And endurance, a lot of people say, oh, I didn't run 20 miles. However, how am I going to ever run a marathon? Endurance doesn't work that way. Endurance is the total amount of hay you put in the barn. It's not how long that long run was. It's how much the totality of everything that you did. And so that's what I would say. Just limit your long runs to 30%. Look into Barry P, because that will help you do that, and keep your pace slow. I challenge you to go slow.
Yeah, and about that time, the first marathon coach had me coach before. Then the first marathon I ever did was in 2018. And if you look back on my whole year in 2018, I never ran more than 14 miles.
Wow.
That was the longest I ever did, and I finished a marathon. And I mean, it was a PR, right? So, but I hit the time that I was looking for, and I was very happy. Never having ran more than 14 miles beforehand.
Yeah. Well, I like that, Coach, how you said too, just that courage to go slow, look at your heart rate, watch your zone that you're in, and approach this the right way. You will see results. There's
Yes.
patience involved, and that courage includes that patience. and you will see results as proven by your athletes that have followed your plan and have set PRs. So thank you both. This is a great topic. Good to dig in a little bit and reset kind of our thinking and our approach for the team and for those listening on how we should really approach a long run and pace it appropriately. For future podcasts, look us up at bscmultisport.com, and on our YouTube channel, you can click to like and subscribe and watch for future sessions. Thanks for joining.